So you may be considering dentistry as a career that can offer you a ton of wealth and happiness. But let me tell you, after practicing for a few years, nothing can be further from the truth. You see, dentistry is not the same profession as it once was. In 2024, it's extremely competitive to get into dental school, and it's even more competitive when you get out of school as a practicing dentist wherever you decide to practice. Simply put, nothing is handed to you in this career, and hard work is non-negotiable. You'll start to realize once you graduate and start working just how brutal this job can actually be. I've already had 5 jobs in my first 2 years of dentistry. I've been to Medicaid offices, fee-for-service offices, corporate dental chains, private practices. I've seen it all already. This isn't a good thing to say. I would prefer to have one solid job for a long period of time, which means that it was a good opportunity. But as a new grad, I realized that a lot of these opportunities are missing valuable components that a new grad dentist needs, like mentorship, a high enough salary that they expect to make, or even doing the type of dentistry that you want to be doing. In this 2-year span, there was about a period of about 4 to 5 months where I wasn't even making money. I consider myself a really hardworking individual, and even in my DSO job at Aspen, I was making over $300,000. Just like that job paid me well, it also came with a lot of negatives that I just wasn't ready to handle at the time. And with that initial associate salary, you become accustomed to the money with the lifestyle expenses you're incurring, the amount of student loan payments you're gonna have, just the regular cost of life in general. The money becomes very normal, and when that feels normal to you, the shininess of the profession starts to dull and your perspective on a lot of things begins to change. No matter how much money you make, your life will quickly equilibrate and you'll feel very comfortable with the amount of money and it won't seem that special anymore. And in return for that nice chunk of change, your boss may treat you as a pawn in their chess match, just trying to leverage their business. And your managers may be bossing you around, telling you how to do dentistry, dictating your hours, all of this at the expense of your own personal mental health, your family time, and your time away from the office. At Aspen, I saw my manager, who was 22 years old, undermining my authority as a doctor, telling me where I need to be, how I need to be treating patients. And since she was with the company longer than me, she had more pull from the owner doctors. And that was so unfair to me because dare I go against the office manager or the regional manager, my owner dentist who owned 30 practices at the time would come after me and be like, why would you talk to her like that? How can you ever, doc, you don't know the philosophy of our treatments here and things like that, which was, when I got into dentistry, I never expected to have to deal with this level of politics before. And with the rise of DSOs, I feel like this is becoming more and more common. DSOs are now putting managers who have the company's priorities at heart. People who are ride or die for the company, who will make sure the metrics are the highest, who call the people that come into the practice clients instead of patients. That was a big distinguishing factor because the doctors are treating patients, but the managers are taking care of the clients. The whole operation left me really uneasy, so I left my corporate job even though they were paying me so much money. And as I started bouncing from job to job, I began to get more fed up with the little nuances of being an associate dentist, and now I have my eyes fixated on owning a private practice. And to be quite honest, I expected to be making way more money with way less effort, and I'm not. So if you're watching this video, I want you to be prepared for the challenges that await you as a new doctor. As a dentist, happiness is not guaranteed. Wealth is not a given. Work-life balance may or may not exist for you. Glamorous lifestyle that was portrayed to me as a youth isn't exactly my reality, what I'm facing today. And it's interesting because growing up, I thought all of these aspects of dentistry were part of the package that would be handed to you when you graduate. But after a few years of practicing, I quickly was able to shatter this illusion. And there's definitely gatekeeping involved here from pre-dental students, dental students, and even really fresh grads who don't see the reality of what dentistry is like until you've gone through the process of unemployment, bad managers, low-paying jobs, just struggle to find mentorship. These are all very real struggles that new dentists are facing. But it's disguised behind the few dentists that you may know or may have known growing up who live these incredibly extravagant lives with a lot of free time, money, who are devoting tons of time for their families and have very cool hobbies. Like in my own personal experience, I have an older brother that's a dentist. And growing up, seeing his lifestyle, I'm not gonna lie, it made me come into dentistry. I'm like, yeah, I want that life. Drives a cool car, tons of money, all that stuff, right? Looking at his lifestyle, it seems so far-fetched and almost unattainable from where I am now. And I think that's because there's a lot of barriers being put up nowadays that didn't really exist 5 to 10 years ago. But seeing him while growing up, I saw what he was doing. He was doing very basic dentistry, fillings, crown, and bridge. He's making a ton of money, was putting in 30, 35 hours max working, and he was able to enjoy his life. But I quickly realized that doing fillings and crowns all day with today's reimbursements simply don't equate to the lifestyle and salary that he was making. The competition in my area also seems to be way more than he's facing because he's also in rural New Jersey. Whereas me living in Miami, it's a completely different ballgame. My patients seem to be extremely educated with their dental IQ. Patients are holding on to their money more nowadays. I'm not sure if that's related to the economic climate that we're currently facing, what it is, but they want to see what their insurance is covering. There's very few patients who are willing to pay cash for all these procedures, which for him, it seemed to be the backbone of his practice. And while also working in a major city, I'm almost forced to be doing all these complex procedures for general dentists to maintain patients, keep them in-house, and refer as least as possible out so the practice can make the most money. Now I'm responsible for doing molar endos, full mouth crown and bridge preps, full arch implant surgery, and bracket and wire ortho. All of this stuff is cool and I like to do these things, but because these are all specialist procedures, it also comes with specialist level stress. Seeing him do crown and bridge and basic fillings, he was not even stressing at all. Yet when I go to work and I see some treatments on the schedule that I have to do and I'm like, whoa, it's like tonight I want nothing to do besides go home and just like melt on the couch because I know this is gonna take all the energy out of me to do this procedure. And I'm sure new grads all over the country are being put in these positions to keep things in-house and focus on expanding their skill set. You wanna tap into a major city, you're gonna start to see that you need an expanded skill set to even get a job here because there's so much competition for dentistry in a major city like Miami, New York, and LA. Why would any doc hire you if you're trying to do fillings and crowns all day? No, they want the doc who's super experienced, who can handle anything that comes in the door and is ready to produce as much money as possible for their business, since their business probably has high rent, high overhead, and all the other stuff associated with big city life. But now I'm being forced to do all of these crazy complex procedures. I'm trying to do it as safe as possible. Like literally the other day, my boss was telling me to do a full arch of crown preps. And the dude is timing me like, bro, I'm trying my best. I'm working as hard as possible. I'm trying to do quality work. And the fact that you're timing me and telling me that there's other doctors who are willing to take your job, who are more qualified, like we need to make sure you're producing enough. It's a very toxic environment and at times I just don't feel comfortable with my job stability here. And I don't know if this is something I can do long term, but I definitely get very uneasy at times. Like I'm still learning. Everybody in this craft is still learning. Even if you're 20 years out, you're still learning things all the time. It's the practice of dentistry, right? You're constantly focusing on getting better. But it's just been such a stressful journey up until this point, starting my 3rd year out of school. One thing that's really stressful is dealing with complications and actually patient management. You don't really realize how big of an issue this becomes until you're working and you start doing more complex procedures, like implant failures that come back or molar endos that still have periapical lesions after 6 months or so. You start to see these things. Like if you place enough implants, you're gonna see failures. Oral surgeons see failures, periodontists see failures. That happens. But when the patient is spending $2,000, $3,000 on an implant and it fails, and now you must tell them that we need to take out the implant, graft it, come back in 3 months, let it heal for another 4 or 5 months. Like that is a very tough conversation to have. I didn't expect to really have these talks all the time with patients where their dentures aren't fitting or their bite's not right with the crown and bridge work. It just never ends. And especially when you're doing complex work like implants, it almost makes you feel uncomfortable to keep trying and learn and become better. Because you may see a week where you see a failure or a couple of weeks in a row where something bad happens with an implant surgery. It's like, should I just refer all this out for the rest of my life? But then you realize if you want to become better, you have to keep taking these with stride and you have to keep learning. But then also, you don't exactly know what went wrong either during the clinical procedure. So a lot of it's trial and error. And if you don't have mentorship, it can be very long and tough process to get better. That's why I take a lot of photos in clinical practice, because at least I'm having a good idea of how the site looked before, how the osteotomy looked, when it was placed, how the sutures were done. I'm able to paint a better story for a lot of my clinical procedures. All right, so another reason why I'm not as happy as I'd like to be currently practicing dentistry is my perception of dentistry was that I'd have a lot of autonomy. And actually, growing up, all the dentists I saw in my life who were living that kick-ass lifestyle were owner dentists or specialists. And I never really got to know the lifestyle of an associate dentist. And actually, having a boss right now at this stage of my life, I just turned 30, and as I go to work, I'm being told what procedures to be doing. I need to go faster. I have to listen to my manager, give me orders and things like that. It's just not what I expected at this stage of my life. Like, if you haven't by now, you will most likely experience a boss who is gonna push you to your limits. He's gonna push you so hard to the point where he's just using you to fulfill their own specific dreams and really just rinse and repeat you. And they do this with new grads all the time, especially in corporate. And I started to see that when my hours were so high. I was doing 40, 50 hours clinical dentistry and being forced to work on weekends where my owner dentist was barely even practicing. And even in my current job in Miami now, I'm still working 12-hour days, 6 days a week at times, which is absurd. Nobody even imagines a practice to work in those hours, yet here I am. I'm just finishing off 6 days in a row, 72 hours of clinical dentistry this week. And today is the one day I have off, so I decided to record this video. And not only am I expected to work these crazy hours, I'm also expected to do a lot of risky procedures or even take on more risk. Like, for example, my coworker is a new grad, and he's just not that good with implants. He's not that good with surgery. He doesn't flap. He doesn't know how to take out wisdom teeth, and his extraction skills are debatable. But when things go wrong, I am expected to step in and save the day, yet that requires me to slap my name on the case. Now, I'm responsible if something goes wrong. I have no choice because my job is on the line and I'm just trying to be a team player. They'll hit you with that one for sure. Like, if you decide to talk outside your lane or try to move differently, they're gonna be like, Doc, you're not a team player. Don't you wanna help the team succeed? And there's so much politics involved once you get into private practice dentistry, it's insane. But this work schedule is my boss's schedule. My boss is a maniac, so he requires his workers to work like him. If anything happens with the staff, it falls on me. It's my problem. I'm the leader. Everything needs to be handled by me. If there's a bad review online, it comes down to me not being good enough. There's a lot of nagging and micromanaging that I just didn't expect to be a part of my daily life as a dentist. My owner doctor, who owns like the 30 practices, was just telling me I didn't want to treatment plan SRPs on everybody. Sits me down, calls me over and says, hey man, like, you're being unethical. You're not really doing the best for the patient. Like, you see this like piece of calculus here, man, like that's it, man. Like, you're not really doing good by the patients. And these are like 20-year-olds, man, like 20-year-old patients coming in with just gingivitis and stuff. It was awful stuff. And you don't always have a say in everything that you're doing when you're an associate dentist. I didn't expect it to be like that. But in corporate, you do make a ton of money because you do fulfill the company's agenda. It's definitely a hidden truth that I think a lot of us are observing now more and more and should be talked about more often. And while on the topic of salary, I expected to be making way more money and with less effort than I currently do now. Maybe initial salaries of $150,000 to $200,000 is a lot for a normal person or somebody who's not a doctor. But I thought as a dentist, I would be clearing like $300,000 to $500,000 easily in the first few years of practice without really having to stress so much or move to rural Florida, Fort Myers, or do full arch implants and full mouth reconstruction and have to handle all these really crazy complications. But I do think that $300,000 to $500,000 cushy, easy lifestyle was a thing for dentists of the past, maybe like a decade ago. But nowadays with the high cost of living, inflation, student loans, it seems like our money just doesn't go as far. But come on, like it took me 10 years of my life to become a dentist. I'm sure you've put in the sweat and tears and blood and all of that stuff to get to where you are today. And you want to enjoy this stuff. You don't want to be super stressed out. You want to have the money to support your family and your lifestyle. And I'm just realizing it isn't as much as I'd expect. And maybe I'm just being selfish, but I believe anybody who puts in the time and effort deserves to reap the rewards that they worked for. At the end of the day, I'm not content financially because I don't really have stable job security as an associate. If my boss decides to fire me because I'm not doing preps fast enough, then I'm going back to being unemployed, which is exactly what I did when I moved to Miami. And that's a really scary thought. And your job is never safe as long as you're an employee for somebody else. So the solution seems to be owning a private practice or specializing. But the barriers to do those things too also seem very difficult for new grads. Where do I get a loan for $800,000 to $1 million right now? I already have loans for dental school. Where am I able to find a practice that hasn't been vetted by a DSO? If you have found a practice for sale, make no mistake about it, that practice has most likely already been vetted by a DSO and deemed it not extremely profitable to the point where they passed up on it. Multiple businesses, multiple DSOs have passed up on this practice and have run the numbers very well to deem it not successful enough to cop and not to buy, and to deem it not profitable enough to acquire. So that's the pickings that we're dealt with now. So all of these things I've mentioned currently have me feeling very uneasy and worried about the future. I don't know where my life will be. I don't know if I'll be able to get a practice soon. I don't know if I'll stay in Miami and currently work at my job. How sustainable is it to work 12-hour shifts 6 days in a row? Thankfully, I do have a support system here. I've made some really good friends. I live with my best friend currently, but I just don't know how sustainable all of this is. And I want to get a private practice, but I just don't feel like I'm ready for it. Is anybody ever ready to own their practice? But I will say that the idea of practice ownership is definitely a dream of mine. Having my own hours, my hand-picked all-star team, doing the dentistry that I love to do, providing the quality that I want, choosing my own hours, closing the office for periods at a time while I can go on vacation and see my family more often. All of this stuff sounds like a really beautiful fantasy right now. I'm able to acquire a practice and start on that path soon. If you're considering it, I hope that you're able to do it as well. And I want to know what you guys are thinking. Am I the only one feeling like this? I'm curious to know what you're thinking. Drop a comment down below, engage, and let's talk about our problems so that we can overcome them together. See you on the next one.